Hello everyone! I'm so excited to bring to you the Braid Patterns book DVD. Everyone has been asking me for this project to be done, so we're finally here. We're going to show you step by step how each pattern is done. We're going to give you as many details as you need. There's going to be a lot that you'll see in this video. So if you guys are excited as I am, let's get started. I want to give you guys a little bit of information on the basics of braiding. Even though we're going to show you the braiding patterns, we want to make sure that you understand how to get your braids done properly. So I want to let you know what things you can add to your braids, because you always have to add something to make sure your braid is nice and strong. The first thing that you would select would be synthetic hair. Another thing you could select would be nylon thread. As you notice, we have 4 strands here. Another thing you can use would be human hair. The 4th thing that you could use would be yarn. In order to create a braid, you're going to part the section that you're going to be working in. I'm going to clip this hair away. I have selected an amount of hair that can either be equal to or less than the amount that I parted out of the client's own hair. You don't want to have more synthetic hair than your client's hair. What you would do is separate the hair that you've selected. You're going to place your fingers in. One side, your fingers are going to be in forward, and on the opposite side, your fingers are in backwards. You're going to actually twist. You're going to place the hair right in front of the client's own hair. Notice how I grab with my 2 fingers here, my middle finger and my ring finger. I connect. And I'm going to braid for a few seconds in this one location without moving forward. I stay here. And now I can begin to advance back. I braid at least once or twice in the same location before I add more hair. Once, twice, and now I add more hair. So this is how you get a nice firm braid. You want a firm braid because when you're weaving, you want to make sure that when you shampoo your client's hair for the first time, that everything stays in place. So this is very important. Now, even though I've only gone through this very briefly, there is a video, which is video number 30. It's called Teach Me How to Braid. So we do go fully into detail, letting you know how you add the synthetic hair, how you do a basic braid, how you do a cornrow, how you connect braids. There's a lot in that video. I just showed you guys how you add the synthetic hair. Now I'm going to give you a bonus. I'm going to let you see how we apply the nylon threads. Nylon thread is applied when you want to make your braid very small and very firm. And it's for those times when your client really doesn't want her braids to be large. It's also for when your client has an allergic reaction to the synthetic hair. This will be your next selection if you haven't chosen human hair. So what I needed to do was grab my 4 strands. I'm going to place my fingers in the same way I did with the synthetic hair. One side is in forward, one side is in backwards. I'm going to twist and I grab onto the knot, place my thumb underneath, and I'm going to attach my threads to the client's hair. Same concept as the first time. I'm just going to attach it and begin to braid in this space a few times before I advance back. Now I can add more of the client's own hair into my braid. Once, twice before I grab more of the client's own hair. And this is something to watch out for. Sometimes you're braiding and you end up pulling hair in from another location, and this can cause breakage. It can become a big problem for you and your client. So always be conscious of those things. So as you notice, this is a very, very small braid. So if you're looking for that very fine braid, the nylon thread will be your selection. The first pattern that we're going to show is the circular braid. This is your basic braid. It's the one that we choose most of the time, and most of you are choosing this braid pattern when you don't know what else to do. One of the times you use this pattern would be when you want to basically erase what the client already has. Meaning her hair is dark brown and you want to add dark hair or light hair or a different texture of hair. So you're basically going to braid all of the hair up. The circular braid takes on the shape of the head. So generally you're going to start your braid behind the client's ear. So you would add your synthetic hair. You'd work from behind the ear and you'd work your way around the head. So basically you start here once again. And you begin to braid down and work your way around the perimeter of the head. Just work your way around. One thing that's really important to know is that your braid needs to be really small on the edge. Have you ever sewed a track in and you laid it on the braid that was on the edge and it basically sat up and it kind of pushed out? Well, we don't want that to happen. So what you would do is make sure that when you part the hair along the hairline, that you part it very small so that this braid once again remains very small. You wouldn't want a big lumpy braid here. Your circular braid can be used when you want to change textures, as I said earlier. So if your client has straight hair and you want to incorporate curly hair or wavy hair, and her hair texture won't match the hair that you're going to apply, this would be a time that you would use that circular braid. In case you were wondering why we start the braid behind the ear, we want to make sure that we make a small braid. We want to make sure that we don't have a lot of bulk as we move around the head. Later on, we're going to talk about the different locations where you start your braids. So there's always a point and a reason to why you start there. So we just want to make sure that this braid is very small around the back, and we want to continue to keep the parting very small so that as we move around, we do still have a very, very small braid around the edge. Another thing I want to tell you about is using a large latch hook tool. We would create our braid all the way around, as you guys can see in the pattern. We go all the way to the top of the head. We will have a final braid. When we get to the final braid, this braid is going to be pulled down under the other braids that are already done. We will put it push this tool under the final braid, place the end of this braid in the hook, and then we will pull this down underneath as it's depicted in the photos. So now we're on the circular pattern with the two braids. You've seen how we do a circular braid and continuously work around the head. This time we're going to do two sets. There is a reason why we select this pattern. It's basically used for your DSW. A DSW is in short for detachable sewn weave. This is a technique that I created several years ago to allow you to create a full unit for a client who is not present. You're going to be able to take measurements of the client's head. The client does not have to be there once again. You create this unit. Once your client returns, you place the unit on the client's head and you sew it in place. So let me talk a little bit about this braid pattern. You would still start here, work your way around the perimeter of the head, and you get back to the same location. You braid that braid to the end. That braid is going to remain separate. You're now going to start a second braid. Work your way around the client's head, all the way around until you finish. That will be your second braid. You're going to do your latch hooking, pull your braid through the rest of this, and this one is going to be hanging out. You can latch hook it through as well, or you can sew these braids down. It's totally up to you. I'm going to show you a little bit of a video. We're going to show it in fast forward motion just so that you can actually understand and get a visual on how this technique truly works. In order to do the DSW, you're going to braid your client's hair up. You're now going to need a plastic cap, some clear masking tape. You will now layer this tape until you get a very hard shell. Then you're going to create a few markings which indicate where the braid is located. Your client leaves. You're going to need a net. You're going to place the net on the mold, and you're going to begin to sew your wefts onto the net. Once you've sewn all the wefts onto the net as if the client is present, you close it up. You're going to remove it from the mold. You're going to place this unit onto the client's head. We will now sew it down around the perimeter braid to hold it in place. Now the unit has been attached. It stays on for about a month. So now that you've seen how the DSW works, let's go back to the braid pattern. So remember, she has two sets of braids. She has one on the edge and one that's in the middle. These two are independent. When your client comes in to have her unit attached, you're going to place the full unit on the client's head. Let me show you that real quick. So now let me show you what a DSW unit looks like. So if my client has her two sets of braids, we would have placed the unit on, sewn it down into place. 1 month goes by, and this particular client comes back, but she does not want to have all of the braids taken loose and rebraided. She wants a really fast service. So what we would do is we would snip the threads that we have placed around the perimeter to hold it in place. We will undo them. We would remove the DSW unit. Remember, she has two braids. What we're going to do now is remove this braid. Remove the braid. Then we're going to shampoo through the other braid, so this braid is still existing. Now, when the client comes out, we're going to place her under the dryer to dry this braid. Then we're going to rebraid the perimeter braid, which gives you another or a stronger base again. The braid is nice and firm. We will now take our DSW unit once it's been cleaned and dried. We will place it back on the client's head. Along the edge where the firm braid is, we're going to sew it back down in place. So this client can get in and out just like that. So that's why you want to use the two circular braids. We're on the center start braid pattern. Basically, you are going to start at the very top of the head, and you're just going to begin to braid around in a circle. We'll continue to work our way around and around until we've covered the top of the head. So all of the hair up to this point will be braided in a circular fashion. So when can you use the center start? You could use it if you want to do a DSW top unit. Here's the DSW top unit. I'll turn it over for you. It's just made for the top of the head. So I'll place it on my model so that you can get a better understanding. So if her hair was already braided up, we will place the unit on to her braids. And as you can see, she already has her hair cut down short in the back. So this unit will blend into her own hair. Now what's great about using the center start braid pattern is that when you start at the beginning at the top of the head, you work your way down. So wherever you need to stop, you have an opportunity to select that at the last point, opposed to starting here and maybe you might start the braid too low and you can't take it all loose. So it's best to start at the top, work your way down, and stop wherever you need to stop. Now, if you want to learn how to create a DSW unit, we do have a video, of course. That's video number 21. So this is how it would blend in. The next pattern is called the S braid and circular braid. Basically, as you can see, we're going to start at the bottom of the client's hairline. We're going to work our way in one direction, and we will quickly swoop back in the opposite direction. Then we're going to go in the opposite direction. What we're basically doing is creating horizontal braids at the back of the head. When we get off the small of the back of the head, where we get on the larger part of the head, that's where you begin to do your circular braid. Some people like this braid pattern because you can place your tracks straight across at the bottom individually, and then when you get to your circular braid, you can begin to sew around with the pattern of the circle. This pattern can be used for your full weaves. Pattern for the open top weave. I can tell you that a lot of people select this pattern when they really don't know how to close. So if you guys want to learn how to close, of course, we have a video for that. It's called the closures video, and we can definitely help you. But what I'm going to show you now is how you get started. There are a few things that you really want to know. The placement of the braid at the top of the head is very important. So what you're going to do is do a test. You're going to use a rat tail comb, and you're going to place it underneath the hair that you've combed down. Now notice as I place the comb here, you can still see the comb. So this is not an ideal location for you to place your braid. So what you're going to have to do is continuously work your way down until you no longer see your comb. If the comb shows up even a little bit, that's a location that's going to show your track. So what I want you to do is just keep moving down. Now my model here is perfect because in an ideal situation, on most people, you would be able to start up a little higher. But as you notice, it's a little thin on the top. So I have to make sure I work my way down until my comb is not going to show. So once again, you keep working your way down until that comb doesn't show. Here is the proper location. So I would use a clip to help me, and I would work my way all the way around. I need to find that location so that my track doesn't show. So this is good here. Now the back of the head is the hardest part. You would really want to place your track here, but as you notice, the comb is truly showing up. So I need to keep working my way back until it does not show up. Here is the proper location on this particular model. The second test that we would want to do will be the test with the weft itself. So I'm going to grab a track and I'm going to place it underneath, and I'm going to make sure that as my weft is placed underneath, it does not show up. So I'm just going to ask my model to just give me one finger to just help me for a second, and place the finger on the weft. And how about placing one here too? So what I'm going to do is do my final test, which is to comb down the hair over the weft. So as you can see, we have great coverage here. If I was up here, as you can see, it would have shown up. So we have great coverage. And this is what we wanted to know. Okay, so you would bring your track all the way around to make sure that you're in the right location. So make sure you do this test. You don't want to get yourself into trouble. Your client's just going to come back and complain, and we don't want that. Okay, so now we need to get started with that braid that's going to go underneath everything. Just get this nice and neat. I am going to use my nylon thread to do this braid. Why? Because I want to make sure that this first braid is nice and small. So I'm just going to do a quick demo for you. I'm not going to even finish the braid. I just want to make sure you understand how it's done. So I have my 4 strands, as we used earlier. And I'm just going to demonstrate how small this first braid should be. Now, as long as you make this first braid nice and small, you won't have a really big lump on the top of the weave. Okay, so remember, I'm not going to finish this braid out. What I want to show you is what it looks like once we place a track over the braid. See, we need to make it small so that it lays nice and flat. So everything is good here. Everything is good, and that's what we're looking for. So make sure you do these tests so that as you are working with your clients, that everyone's happy, everything is nice and flat, and everything looks good. There's one more tip that I can give you in reference to getting started at the top of the head, which is opposed to using a full weft, meaning the way that the weft comes when you purchase the pack of hair. It comes where it's sewn together. You can actually split it with a razor, and you would actually get this, a split weft. It's very fine. So opposed to using a full whole track, you would use the split weft at the very top. So this would be even more flat than the first weft. So you will continue your braid around and around and work your way down. As you work on the large part of the head, your braid will be here. And when you get to this portion, you could either do a zigzag braid going down, or you can do a circle braid at the back. It's up to you. Here's the pattern, top loose with connecting braids. Her hair has been parted out at the top. This is going to be the coverage over the top of the wefted, the track. Then you're going to begin your first braid on the left or the right, it doesn't matter. If you begin here, you're going to braid 3/4 of the way to the other side. Then you're going to braid 1/4 of the way and meet it. These two will be connected. You're going to move down into your next row. Because we started and connected here, our next connection is going to be on the opposite side. So we will now braid on this side to this point, and we will take the braid from this side, come here, we're going to grab some of this hair. As you notice, it was getting too full. So what we we did was we dropped out some of the hair from the braid so that this braid won't be too large. We can pick this hair up later. So we were coming this way, we connect to the first braid, we continue on, and we bring these two braids together on the opposite side. What we're doing here is balancing the weight of the fullness of the braids. So we wouldn't want to continuously connect on one side because we end up possibly with a lump over there. So this is the pattern where we're connecting on both sides. Our next pattern, we're going to incorporate it in now because it's done in a similar fashion. But what we're going to do for the next pattern, which is the top loose with connecting braids with loose hair, we're going to part out a section. So it's going to be up to you whether you braid everything like this all the way down to this point, or you can leave hair in between. So if you're looking at your book, you will be going to the next page. So here in this row, it would be the client's own hair. So I'm just going to move this out of the way with a quick braid. Because this is the final on this side, we've braided it down some. We're going to now braid in this next row. Keep our partings kind of small. So at this point, I'm just going to do a quick braid for you guys. I just want you to understand how you connect everything. We do have this braiding technique on video number 30. Which is Teach Me How to Braid. So that's another video that we can reference to make sure you guys understand fully how to connect your braids. The fact that we left the hair out in between gives you that skip track opportunity again. So you can leave your client's hair loose in between, and then you'll sew your tracks on every other braid. Row up and just show you how we would connect it on this side. Oh, by the way, even though we're showing you that your braids are starting at the hairline, you could also have left some of the client's own hair free along the hairline on both sides, so that when you sew your wefts on, you'll have hair that will cover the edge of the weft, and that will give you an opportunity to be able to do ponytails. So I'm just continuing to braid from this third row. I'm going to grab this hair and we can take it in with us. So in this row, we start on this end and we connect here. In order to connect without a large lump, I'm just going to grab a small section of this braid. There are 3 pieces. I'm grabbing one. I turn. Then I'm grabbing the second one. Turn. And I grab the third. And we bring this braid down into the next row. So this is how these braids are connected. Just just wanted to bring the model back into the camera so that you guys can see the final look. So remember, we did 2 different braid patterns just for the sake of time. The first section here will be your top loose with connecting braids, and then we started to leave hair out in every other row to show you the second braid pattern, which is the top loose with connecting braids plus the free hair. So just a little recap, we went through the points where they were connecting. So we ended up somewhere around here. So we had another braid that went in under this row, and we connected the hair in. And on the opposite side, we had these braids that are connected. So as we have these that connect over here, we start to do a circle braid. As we reach the braids that connected on this side, we grab the ends of those and we bring them into the circle braid, and we continue our way around in a circular fashion at the back. This is pretty much the easiest way to finish it up because you don't have a lot of starting and stopping points at the back of the head. So earlier I was discussing how you use your large latch hook tool when you have a final braid. So here's a better way of showing you guys. So here's the final braid. You're going to place your large latch hook tool underneath the braid next to the final braid. Place the end of the braid into the hook and we pull through. And we continue to pull this braid underneath the other braids until everything is nice and flat. So here's an alternative way to finishing up with your braids. So I'm just going to turn my latch hook tool over so that I can place the end of the hair into the hook, and I'll flip it over the other way. And I just continue to work until I get everything in. So here's the finish. 2 different braid patterns. And remember, if we wanted to, we could have left all of the hair on the hairline free so that as we place our tracks on to the braids, they would have coverage. So here's a good depiction of what I'm saying. If we would have left this entire area free, you can pull the client's own hair on top. This pattern is really nice because you always have small beginnings, so you always have a flat surface to start on. So this pattern gives you an opportunity to have the edge of your weave nice and flat. For the sake of time, I'm just going to talk about how the top circle with connecting braids is done. The last pattern that we did, this is actually the finishing to the last pattern, but the difference in the last one and the one that we're going to talk about right now is that there is a circle braid at the top, meaning that this part is closed in, so the client's own hair is not left loose. So what we would do to get started with this pattern is we would begin in the center and we would start braiding a circle and work our way down. So we would have braided all of this hair. It will be braided flat, and then the braid that comes from the top actually connects into these other braids, just the same way we did the connections on each side. So once again, we would have done a circle braid. The braid may have ended somewhere like here, and then we would start our braids going 1/4 of the way, and then starting on the opposite side, going 3/4 of the way, connecting. And then in the next row, we would start on the other side and braid to here. And then we would start here and braid to here and connect. So everything that you saw us do in the last pattern would be the finishing to the braid that has a circle at the top. Okay, so the difference is one time the hair is left loose in the old pattern. This pattern, the hair is braided at the top, so you can close it up and sew all of the hair on top. We're on the next pattern, which is the side part sewn weave. So basically, we have a section of hair that's off to the side, and we're going to place our wefts underneath, and she's going to have more hair on the fuller side. Basically, we would follow some of what we just did in the last pattern, which is to start your braid on one side, work your way 1/4 of the way to the opposite side. Start on the other side, work your way 3/4 of the way to match it. Below that row, we're going to work our way across to the other side. So it's kind of the same thing that we were doing in the last two patterns. The only difference in the pattern that we're showing here in the book is that after you do those 2 sets of connecting braids, you can go ahead and do a full circle braid at the bottom with the rest of the hair. So what I want to show you now is that if you ever have a situation, we're going to show you a whole nother pattern where we're going to incorporate another technique at the top. Here we are at the side part with Malaysian weave. Well, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you will need this technique. And why? Well, basically because I'm sure you've done your full weave, you have your side part already parted out, you apply all of your wefts, and you get to the top, and you go to comb the client's free hair on top of the hair that you've sewn in underneath, and you soon find out that the client's hair is too full and that it doesn't cover the tracks well. So there's a technique that you can do that you can incorporate into your braided technique that will allow you to apply a weft into the loose hair without using an additional braid. Because we know at this point, if we needed to put another braid, we'd have to do the braid first, and then we would have to end the braid somewhere. And this will cause like a lump and just a little, a bumpy situation. So to avoid that, we're going to incorporate the Malaysian technique. In order to do the Malaysian technique, you actually need a special tool kit. Here's the Mika link kit. Inside the kit, you'll find a closing tool, a pulling tool, and an opening tool. You would also need micro links. These are very small rings. They're made of aluminum. And I'm simply going to part out a section. So this will be where her final track would be. I'm going to part out a section of her own hair. We'll leave all of this for coverage. I would work at least 1 inch to 1.5 inches away from her hairline. I would apply my first micro link there. I would now need the Mika closing tool, and I would press up to the base and simply squeeze the microlink completely closed. I would apply several of these all the way around, as you can see in the pattern. I'm going to work my way at least 1 to 2 inches apart. So what we're going to do is bring in the Malaysian video. It's going to be on fast forward just to let you guys know how it's done and you can see it completed. So just to explain a little further, we would continue to place these microlinks all the way across to the other side. Then I would bring in a weft, and I would use my needle and thread, and I would begin to sew the weft to where the microlinks are. So this is a no braid weaving technique. It's extremely flat. Once the hair is sewn in, it's extremely flexible as well. So this is a technique that will allow you to apply a weft to anyone's hair, whether they're straight or whether their hair is coarse. It's great for any texture of hair, so it's a multicultural technique as well. Alright, so we would sew this weft all the way in around this location, and then we will be able to pull the client's hair down over the last weft, and we would have a very nice blended effect going on here. Here's the middle part braid pattern. Basically, you're going to put a part directly down the center of the client's head, and you're going to begin your braid in the center on one side, and you're just going to work your way around in a circle on that one side. Then you're going to start on the opposite side. You're going to do the same thing. Just work your way around and around. What's really great about this technique is that it's for a full weave. You can braid simultaneously with another person. So if you're trying to get your job done, you and your assistant both can braid on each side of the head. People like this pattern because it has vertical lines. The lines, as you notice, are going up and down. So as you're sewing your wefts onto the braids, they look something like this. So you're able to braid this way, and you're able to sew across. So every time you sew, you reach another braid. So that's why most people like this pattern. Part with the circle braid. Well, earlier we were talking about how you section off the client's hair at the top and the center, and you start your braids on both sides so that everything is nice and flat and you can push the hair back. Well, if you have a client that isn't interested in pushing the hair back off the face and it doesn't matter, you can basically do one circle braid behind this location. So your hair is parted out in the top, and you can begin your braid generally right here at the tip of the ear and work your way forward. This way you don't have that much bulk in the braid, and you keep your braid very small. You're going to work your way right behind the location where you left the hair out. You're going to just continue to work your way around in a circle. You just need to be conscious of the fact that you don't want this edge braid to be very full and thick. So keep your edge braid really small and you'll have success. The middle connection braids. This is where you want to do maybe a single track, and you want to start on the ends. You want both of the ends to be nice and flat. So you start your braid here and work your way to the middle, and you do that same thing on the opposite side. Well, there's something special that you need to know, which is we have added the synthetic hair. But normally when we cut the hair from the pack, we normally have a long piece. Well, when you're doing this technique, you don't want to have a lot of long hair coming from one side because it will be too full. So what you're going to need to do is cut that hair in half, and we're going to have about this much. So now we will fold that and do the braid. This will give us a very thin ending. When we're done, we will crisscross the braids, and we will use our needle and thread to sew the braid underneath the other braid. We'll do the same on the opposite side, and then we will sew our weft on top. And that's how you do this technique. The horseshoe braid. This is where you part down the center of the head and you begin to start your braids on one side, but they're basically in a horseshoe shape. They're kind of curved. So you do this all the way down on one side, then you do the same thing on the opposite side. What will happen is you're going to end up with two sides, two sections. When you're done, you could opt to braid one side of those braids all the way down with a cornrow, and then you can do the other side of those braids with the cornrow. Then you can choose to take the ends of those braids and either tuck them in the middle or tuck them on the outside of the two cornrows that you just did. You can sew this down. This will give you a little bulk at the center of the back of the head. You could also choose to take these two sides that you braided. You can braid them into one cornrow, which means that the braid is on the outside, but it's all together. You can take the ends of this one cornrow and tuck it under and sew it in place. The final option is that you can do an under braid with all of the braids that you have coming in from both sides. The under braid goes inside, and then when you're done, you can take the ends of that, tuck it under, and sew it in place. This technique is great for when you want to create a little fullness at the back of the head, or at a time when it doesn't matter if you have fullness or not. Specifically when you're doing a full curly weave. You know that the curly weave doesn't have to be flat, so this is an ideal braid pattern for that. It's also great for the fact that you have a lot of small braids that are started on the edge of the hairline. So if you choose to create a wild look like so, you can put your track onto each individual braid and work your way to the opposite side. So you have a lot of rows that you can work from one side to the other. And when you're done, you can actually fluff it out and have it stand up and be very full. So this is why you would use the horseshoe braid technique. So if this client has very long hair in the back and we want to decrease the bulk, we will braid it up. We'll leave the front out. And what we're going to do is give her a bob. So we're going to use the very short hair at the back. There's no need to use a 10 or 12 inch hair at the back because you're just going to cut it very short. So we continue to lay these until we get to the point where this hair is too short. After this point, we would start to lay the longer hair in. We lay it straight across until we reach the point where we've placed our microlinks, which could start here. When we reach the microlinks, what we're going to do is sew the weft onto where the microlinks are located, sew onto the next microlink, and then sew onto the braid until we reach the opposite side, which would have the microlinks on the opposite side as well. So what would happen here is the client's hair is left free on the hairline, and as you can see, we'd get a very nice natural appearance on the hairline. So this client can push the hair behind her ear, or she can wear it down. Now in this case, the scenario that we're working with is that once again, her hair was very long, and she asked me for a bob hairstyle, but she wanted it to look natural in the front. So we left the front loose, we put the short hairs in, we put the longer hairs in, and they match up to the sides, and then we comb the top down and blend everything in, and we give her a beautiful cut. So we have a new braid pattern that's going to be incorporated into the book. It's very similar, but we are going to use a braid opposed to using a no braid technique on the other side. Once you have your circular braid done in the back, we would do very small braids that start a little bit away from the hairline. So we leave the client's own hair free, then we do a small braid, and we're going back to using that large latch hook tool to pull the braid underneath the other braids. So we'd make sure everything is underneath. So we'd be able to do the same thing we did earlier. We can place those short hairs, and when we reach this location, place the longer hairs. So they would be sewn onto those small braids. Her own hair is left free in between to blend. We'd move up to the next row and we'd be doing the same thing. So this is the effect that we would get. The client's own hair would be placed right in front of the braid. So we still have coverage with this technique as well. So you have your option of doing the microlink technique or doing the braids. Now there is another technique that we can show you. I'm going to go back to this side of the head because this technique is very similar to the Malaysian technique. With the Malaysian technique, the microlinks go down first and we sew the weft to the link. But with this technique that I'm going to show you now, it's called Makani. Makani is a technique that I created a few years ago. It's where we're going to apply a weft, but there is no braid, there is no sewing, and there is no glue. So I'm going to demonstrate how this technique is done. We place the weft in the part where we need it. We're going to go down and grab some of the client's own hair and some of the hair from the weft. We'll slide up a microlink. Now right now I'm showing you this technique with a blonde color link. This is just for a visual on the video. So we squeeze this completely closed. Now we're attached. What I'm going to show you now is using a dark colored link so that you get to see exactly what would happen if we use a link that blends in directly with the client's own hair color. The Makani technique is done in two different ways. We could also poke through the weft. We can get some of the client's own hair. Let's do that again. We're just going to go through and get some of the client's own hair, and we pull her hair through the weft itself. And then we go to the weft and we grab some of the hair from the weft. And we're going to place the microlink on the twisted hair. You guys are getting a lot of great information in this video. We squeeze it completely closed so we're attached again. So if you don't want to sew onto the edge, you can just simply attach the weft with the use of the microlinks. So at this point, we will bring the needle and thread in and we will sew across. So you have three options that you can choose with this particular technique. What we're going to do is pretend that this is the end of the hairline, because as you can see, her hair is very short back here. So if this were the end of the hairline, I would take the braid to this point and I would braid it a little bit so that it doesn't come loose. Then I come in and do my second braid. What I'm going to do is braid this one, and I'm going to stop at a certain point so you guys will get to see where I will stop and how I will connect. So this braid pattern gives us those vertical lines. I wouldn't suggest this braid pattern if the client's hair is too long or too full. We select each pattern that we use based on the final result that we need and based on what we're working with at the time. Alright, so remember, this is the bottom hairline. So I would braid until about this point. All of this is going to work into the same braid. What I would do now is take the end of this braid and I would pull it up into the braid that I'm doing right now. So we're going to gently pull the bottom of this braid up to this point and we connect it. Notice how I'm shifting the hairs around because I'm connecting a full braid with this one. So I have to shift everything around so it's equal portions in each of the three parts of this cornrow. So now I will start to braid down. and I will work my way to my hairline. So I'd be braiding this all the way to the bottom. The technique you just saw me do, I would continue to do the same thing all the way across. So what I would do in the next row is part the hair. Remember, this is my bottom row here. So I would part the hair and I would start to braid until I reach this point. Then I will pull the end of this up into this. And then I will continue this braid and let the end of it hang. So as you see, we have this action going on here, and everything lays pretty flat and close to the head. We just completed the straight back with the braids connected individually. This pattern is a spin-off of the previous pattern. We're basically going to use this same pattern, but the only difference will be that we're going to have a braid that goes around the client's hairline. So the objective here is that we like the vertical braids, but we do want something that we can sew the edge track to. So we would do a braid around a perimeter. So a braid would sit here and we would sew our track to that, opposed to the edge of the track being applied to these individual knots. So there would be a braid that's there separately. Okay, so you can opt to use the braid on the edge or just do these straight back braids. In this case, I would probably apply a weaving net if I do the circle braid around the perimeter, because my net would sit and will be sewn right to that circle braid that will be sitting on the edge. Whenever you apply a net, you now have a new surface. So regardless of the fact that the braids are going back and this braid is along the edge, it now gives you a new flat surface, so you don't have to worry about the beginnings of each of these braids. They're basically gone. So it's all up to you. I just give you the tips and tricks that you can use. And by the way, I pretty much use a weaving net for most of my full weaves. I use the weaving net for sure at the top of the head. And this gives me the opportunity to be able to sew anywhere that I like to sew at the top of the head. When I'm ready to close, I'm able to close in any location. And I don't have the problem with the location of whether the braids are going back or whether they're going in a circle. So this is what you definitely need to do. You can find this technique with using the weaving net on video number 12. That's the full sewn weave video. Invisible part. If we're going to do the invisible part as a bonded technique, we will part the client's hair and we would braid the hair away from the parting. Now, if we were going to do the invisible part as a sewn technique, we would use that same braid pattern that we used that was called the thread bridge, which was where there was 4 braids this way and then a circular braid at the back. So just wanted to share that with you while we're talking about the invisible part technique. So once the hair is braided away, it gives us an opportunity to be able to lay the wefts like so. We will continuously lay these wefts like so. What we did was we braided the hair down on both sides. The braids on both sides are connected as a final braid. We did a circle braid in the back continuously. And we took the ends of these braids on both sides and latch hooked it through the circle braid. So this technique is one that needs to have a very clean part. And you can choose to use synthetic hair, or you can choose to braid the client's own hair, just because we want to make sure that it's very flat. Something else you need to know is that if we wanted to do the invisible part technique, we could still lay the tracks the same way I was just showing you, but we could have also left a fine parting of the client's own hair free in this location, and we would have still done the braids this way. So her own hair would be free here, and we would still lay the tracks this way, so it would have a beautiful separation and it would look very, very natural. So that's your option. Small front braids with a circle back. This braid pattern is used if you're going to apply a lace wig. The way that the pattern is done is that we're going to do very small braids across the front hairline. We're going to do a parting that's about 2 to 3 inches across the front hairline. We're going to do very small braids going back off the hairline. Very small braids all the way across the front line. The back is going to have a circle braid. The way that we are going to connect these front braids with the circle braid is that we're going to start on the side near the ear. We're going to work our way forward when we're ready for that circle braid. We're going to connect about 2 or maybe 3 of those braids that are going back into the circle braid. So as we move around, we grab 2 or 3 and we continue around until we reach the same location. Now at this point, we have not grabbed any of the other braids. The reason why we don't want to grab any of the other braids is that it would create too much bulk across the top of the head. So we're doing what it takes to make sure that the braids are laying flat. As we come back around, we will grab 2 or 3 more of those braids. We continue on around and we continue to gradually incorporate the braids in the front. This will give us a very, very flat front and top section. What we will do next is apply our lace wig. And the lace wig is very clear, so you don't want to have a braid that goes straight across the front line. So once those braids are going back, it gives you a lot of spaces. You would then place your lace wig over the braids and do all of the things that you need to do to apply it. So this is the proper braid pattern to be able to apply a lace wig.